world to seek the rights and freedoms of children. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the high-level conference on justice for children, jointly organized by the European Union and the United Nations Children's Fund. It is part of our continued support to neighboring and enlargement countries in establishing and reforming their juvenile justice systems. And it is also a reflection of the fact that we care for our children, in fact, for all the children. Before taking the stock of the current state of play and what needs to be done in the future, let me underline my strong commitment of implementing the European Union's policy on the promotion and protection of members of society. There are still many challenges regarding the rights of the child and juvenile justice within the EU. The EU itself has adopted several pieces of legislation relevant to children in justice in recent years. For example, the Directive on Sexual Abuse and Exploitation, the Anti-Trafficking Directive, and we intend to propose a new measure on suspects or defendants. The participation of enlargement countries in this conference is very relevant because the topic of today's conference is a priority area for the EU in the accession process. Indeed, the EU Acquis on Children, Rights and Child Protection is not limited to Chapter 23, Judiciary and Fundamental Rights. No less than 17 other Acquis chapters contain legal instruments that have important provisions on children's rights and protection. Despite some progress, there is still scope for considerable improvement when it comes to children's rights. I am thinking in particular about the need to overcome institutionalization of children and to promote preventive mechanisms in support of families. And our concerns don't just end there. Let me mention 6 other important areas that need to be addressed. Lack of prioritizing children's rights in criminal proceedings. The second one, lack of adapted facilities corresponding to specific needs of juveniles in detention. Insufficient free legal and for juveniles. Repressive responses to juvenile offending. Lack of effective alternatives to detention and hence an overuse of detention. And last but not the least, lack of specific measures for child victims leading to unnecessary trauma and re-victimization. This is why it is important that neighboring and enlargement countries not only adhere to international human rights standards, but they must also ensure the effective implementation of recently adopted criminal justice legislation, which in some countries is very progressive. Support for justice reform is one of the core pillars of the European Union external action. It aims at, the first is ensuring judicial independence, impartiality, and integrity, increasing the performance, efficiency, and accountability, the transparency of the justice sector, improving access to justice for the poorest and most vulnerable, and improving detention conditions and introducing alternatives to imprisonment. Successful justice reform initiatives are those built on national priorities, enjoying full political commitment and national ownership, as well as reinforced partnership between civil society and decision makers. I would like to remind you about ongoing support that European Commission is providing in the neighborhood enlargement countries. In the neighborhood countries, the Commission is supporting juvenile justice reform with the rule law agenda. In Armenia, through financial and technical assistance provided by the European Neighborhood and Partnership Instrument. In the enlargement countries, the Commission has been provided support through the instrument for pre-accession assistance to strengthen child protection. Measures in general and to support assistance child for victims. In Croatia, in context of child sexual abuse and juvenile justice system in particular, in Kosovo, Montenegro, former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, and Turkey. Support countries are gradually aligning their legislation with the EU Acquis. The Commission is monitoring this process intensively, including when it comes to the rights of the child in different chapters. On this point, I would like to underline that data collection is an important part of that monitoring work. The European Commission supports the enlargement and neighborhood countries to strengthen their statistical capacity so that reliable data is available to support modern policy. We remain committed to supporting projects and policies that enhance child protection systems and strengthen the rights of children, including as victims or in the context of criminal proceedings. Reconciling that juvenile justice reform is a key entry point for the promotion and protection of children's rights. EU support to date in advancing the juvenile justice reform agenda has focused on 2 areas. First, law reform for the promotion and protection of children's rights, in particular by encouraging and supporting the enactment and review of national legislation to ensure its compatibility with relevant international standards on the rights of the child, in particular, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and enhancing the capacity of law enforcement agencies for investigations into the violation of children's rights and the development of child-friendly procedures in pretrial and court proceedings. Second, combating and discouraging violation of children's rights, in particular by prohibiting violations of the children's rights and ill treatment of children in law, including criminal law, and ending impunity for violations of children's rights, and taking effective legislative, administrative, judicial, and other measures to prevent violations of children's rights right under the jurisdiction of the state and combat impunity for such violations. We do not work alone. UNICEF is one of our traditional partners whose vital work in the field is advancing the children's rights agenda in line with international standards and best practices. I'm particularly proud of the cooperation that we have established with UNICEF to face the consequences of the Syrian crisis. When I was in Jordan recently, I went to the Zatar refugees camp, an inaugurated school run by UNICEF and funded by the European Commission. Through this concrete cooperation, we are giving children living in camps a semblance of normal life and the opportunity to acquire knowledge for rebuilding their lives. Through innovative approaches, research, know-how, and constant involvement, UNICEF has greatly contributed in advancing countries on how to reform their juvenile justice systems based on modern legislation, policies, and operations. Today, we have the opportunity to discuss our achievements, but also remains to be done and how so that children can enjoy their rights and freedoms in states can policies and operations. Today, we have the opportunity to discuss, properly respond to their demands and expectations. That is the world we seek. It is in our mutual interest and it is in our common goal. The children deserve nothing less.